there seems to be an interesting thematic theme happening here today, which I am deeply grateful for. The only thing that we can truly count on is that nothing stays the same. Nothing stays the same. We're in a constant state of evolution. We're in a constant state of change. We're in a constant state of unfoldment. The entire universe is in a constant state of continued unfoldment. It never ceases, ever, ever, ever. And that is the nature, at least in the way that we teach it within the New Thought paradigm, within Unity, it is the nature of God. It is the nature of the divine to constantly, constantly be flowing forth into expression. And that expression is always unique, and it is always whole, and it is always blessed, even when it doesn't feel like it, or even when it seems like the circumstances of the world do not support that idea. What if we truly got behind the notion that change is good? You know? And I say that because in our culture, in our society, in many ways we are taught to fear change. We want to keep things the way that they are because to live within the realm of the known feels comfortable, doesn't it? Something you can count on. It's something you can count on. Well, perhaps if we were to let go of this notion that we have to hold on to the known because it's something that we can count on, we can understand that if we count on a principle that says yes to life, yes to love, that says yes to each and every one of us being the luminous lights that we inherently are, that there is nothing we ever have to fear. That's how I'm choosing to live my life. That's a vision that I hold for myself. And I invite this community into that vision. That vision. And this whole month, the theme is vision. How are we choosing to see the world? How are we choosing to understand our relationship to everything that's in our sphere of awareness? And are we willing to also allow something in the realm of awareness to come through that is below the level of awareness, that may be showing up in our lives in adverse ways? And I want to say that there's stuff that may be showing up in life in adverse ways, but it all is right at the core of who we fundamentally are, and we have the capacity to address it and to change it. So not only is God flowing forth as infinite evolution and as infinite change, but we are the creators of change in our own lives. And it's all rooted in a fundamental principle. God is all there is. God is all there is. This week's message is I have to give a talk title every week because it goes out in an email. It's part of a marketing strategy, so, it can be an enticement. Oh, what is he going to talk about this week? And this week's talk title is First Things First. And yes, first things first, because, it seems appropriate. The first Sunday of the year, we can talk about, beginnings. We can talk about fundamentals. We can talk about where we begin. And it is, because it is the first Sunday of the year, I like to take the first several Sundays actually, and root ourselves in the basics as reminders of where this philosophy is grounded. Now, this is a practice that I began back when I was still a religious science minister through Centers for Spiritual Living, because traditionally in those communities, and the Center for Spiritual Living may be over there in room 4 right now, doing this very thing where they are looking at the first 4 parts of the introduction to the book, The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, which is the fundamental text from which all of the science of mind flows forth. Now, the very first section of that is called The Thing Itself. And I'm going to be talking about the thing itself. And it's a funny thing, because I'm not actually going to focus on Ernest Holmes. They get a little bit of it. But the thing itself is asking, what is this thing? What is this thing? If I say first things first, I'm actually acknowledging the thing itself, that there is a first cause, a first idea, a first notion. And while this idea, the thing itself is, in that language is traditionally Ernest Holmes, here's the thing. We are all, in New Thought, teaching the same thing. We are all teaching the thing itself. Ernest Holmes offered this up. To suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe, that's God, by the way, just in case you were not clear. God is the creative intelligence of the universe. To suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe would create us in bondage and leave us bound would be to dishonor the creative power. That's why I say, fundamentally, everything is always changing. And if we are resistant to change, that's not God, something out there holding back the evolution and the change from within each and every one of us. It is us resisting change. We are the ones who bind ourselves within that. To suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe would create us in bondage and leave us bound would be to dishonor that creative power which we call God. The first principle within unity is God is all there is. God is all there is. And I frequently say, and I think sometimes, I say it every week. I say it every week, and sometimes I think it kind of blows past people's awareness. But I want to get really clear and really invite you to hear this, perhaps as though you're hearing it for the first time. When I take my glasses off, it's really important. If God is all there is, who are we? Well, I would say that is the answer. We are God. Now, see, because then people get a little bristly around that. Those people are saying they're God? Yes. However, what we are not saying, this is not what we mean when we say this. We are not saying we are the allness of God. No, we're saying that there is an infinite power, an infinite presence, an infinite creative intelligence. There is an infinite source from which all flows forth, and we are fundamentally part of that. We cannot be separate from the infinite, because you've heard me say this a million times. If we were separate from the infinite, then the infinite could not be infinite. That, to me, is just logic. Because if the infinite is infinite, and there's something separate from it, then the infinite is finite, and that thing separate from it is finite. There is no finite. We are the magnificence of the divine flowing forth in form. That is fundamentally what we teach. God is all there is. And we refer to God in many, 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 many different ways. We say creative intelligence of the universe. We say universal source. We say the one. We say infinite wholeness. One of the magnificent ways that we refer to the divine is to use this language. It is infinite mind. Now, when I talk about mind, I'm not talking about the brain. What I believe, you get to decide what you believe. But what I believe is that the brain is like a radio transmitter receiver of infinite mind. That it is a tool, a physical tool that is a conduit between infinite mind and our expression of that infinite mind as individualized mind. So I know, right? Mind. Whoo, he's getting real deep in it. Infinite mind and individualized mind are not separate things. They're facets of one thing. We are each and every one of us facets of God. If you think of God as a jewel, like a diamond, and a beautiful diamond has been cut, and all those facets, the faces of the diamond, allow it to shine forth and glitter. We are those facets. We are the way that God gets to glitter. Charles Fillmore had this to offer in defining mind. Mind is the starting point of every act and thought and feeling, the common meeting ground of God and humankind. Mind is the conduit that is flowing forth in and as expression. And that's how I choose to understand my place in this thing called life. Because if we're really going to the foundation of the teaching, first things first, to know that God is all there is the base, the foundation upon which everything else is built. Everything else must be grounded in that basis. When we speak of mind, when you hear the word mind from up here, we are speaking of God. You know, you used a word today, which is one of my favorite words, ineffable. Ineffable is one of my favorite words because it is a word that is used to describe something that cannot be described with words. God is ineffable. And the very notion that we have words to try to describe this ineffable, infinite power and presence, the minute we try to give a thought to it, we've actually limited it. And it is beyond those limitations. That's the nature of God. So when we speak of mind, we are speaking of God, and it's just synonyms, just like love is a synonym for God. God is the universal principle from which all expression arises. All of it. You are an expression of the Most High. And it is a universal principle that has invited your expression into being. But then I have to ask the question, if I'm utilizing the word expression, what does that mean? What is expression? Expression, for me, is the manner in which God is showing up. That's it. It's as simple as that. You know, the thing is, this philosophy, at least to me, is really simple. It's really simple. And then I joke, and Beryl, I think you like this joke because you use this with me a lot. The joke for me is that ministers love to say in 100 words what they can say in just a few. If I do nothing else today, I want this to be the simple message that you take away from today. And we're going to expand upon it over the next several weeks. But today, if there's nothing else you take away from this message today, it is this: God is all there is. That's it. And we are expressions of that. We are the flow, the function, the form of that divine presence and power. So everything in the relative, all of it, 100% of it, is the expression of God. All of it. Even the things that don't feel so good. I woke up to news yesterday that didn't feel so good. I'm sure there are plenty of people in Venezuela who are not feeling so good. And there are people who are feeling good. All of it, and this is the hard one to hear, all of it is divine expression. And I say it's hard to hear because we look at that event and we look at it as a challenge, I think some of us. And I want to be clear, like, I don't intend to talk about the political nature of that event. But anytime that we utilize violence against our fellow human beings, we are in the wrong. We just fundamentally are in the wrong. That quilt is needed now more than ever. And I have talked to Joyce about what happens as well. Yes, it's going to remain up there, but at some point I think it will be important that we take this quilt down and we make it available so that members of this community can add their ideas to it. So we can write our acknowledgments of peace. violence is never the answer. It just isn't. But it is a relative experience, and that expression of violence is still divine. It's a misuse of the divine power. And we can misuse the divine power. I'll tell you what, I have misused the divine power in my life a lot. But every single day is an opportunity to know, to grow, to learn something new, to allow myself to forgive everything, fundamental to our mission here, to forgive everything, to not keep dragging my past into my present. And so whatever has happened that has been a misuse of this divine presence and power in my own personal life, I am willing to let it go and trust and know that I can be proactive in the forward momentum and movement of my life. How about you? Are you willing to let go of all that stuff? You know the word that almost came out of my mouth. Are you willing to let go of all of that stuff? Woo! To know that we are not expressions of the relative, we are expressions of the absolute, we are expressions of the Most High, and to act accordingly. How do you choose to express? If we are all expressions of the one, how do you choose to express? Because it is a choice. There are people who are making choices all around us. And we can either live in alignment with those choices, or we can choose not to live in alignment with those choices and then allow ourselves to act accordingly. For me, that's being proactive. To know that I am always in a place of choice because I am not bound. None of us is bound because God does not bind. You know, growing up, I actually had a pretty scary idea of what God was. Now, I say that with this in mind, that I didn't go to church. I didn't go to church growing up, but this idea of a scary God was still very prevalent in my society and in my culture, and I bought into it. I bought into it. There was, so when I was, I don't know, I must have been like 8, 9, 10, I don't know, my dad could probably tell me what years this was happening. But I used to go to California in the summers, like when I was off of school, and I would spend time with my aunts and uncles, and I would spend some time in Mendocino. First of all, Mendocino, I love Mendocino. Beautiful, right? But imagine me and my cousins, 3 boys, at that age, back when, you know, I'm of a certain generation, Gen X, and we are considered a feral generation. And so, you know, we would go into town, and my cousin's mother would go to her job, and we would just be let loose to wander around Mendocino all day while she was at work. And I remember one summer, we all 3 of us, my 2 cousins and I, we found ourselves going into a vacation Bible camp. And it's just because it was something to do that was not, you know, going and wreaking havoc on the residents of Mendocino, hopped up on sugar because we always went to the candy store. But we went to this vacation Bible camp, and I think what really drew me to that experience is I liked to sing the songs. A lot of music there, and I liked to sing the songs, and I didn't really know what I was singing about, but it was real Jesus rah-rah, which I have absolutely no issue with whatsoever, except that, you know, I was being told an idea that I had to give over my own self-determination and will to that of something outside the self, this ineffable idea called Jesus. And that is the way that I was going to be saved. And I always walked away from that thinking, well, the songs are fun, but I don't really get that whole other part of it. I'm so grateful that I am in a philosophy now that understands and teaches and preaches the true message of Jesus. Love only, forgive everything, remember who you are. Those, to me, are the fundamental teachings of Jesus. Love only, forgive everything, remember who you are. Because what I learned about God from that experience in Mendocino, going to vacation Bible camp, was that God was not to be questioned. I was not to question anything I was hearing. And that God was a personality, a deity, a thing out there that was deeply invested in my life and the way in which I lived my life. And that from that investment, he, and it was a he, right? He doled out reward and punishment based on how I acted in life. Like Santa Claus. What have I come to believe in New Thought? Because I'll tell you, like I said, I did not grow up going to church. I had my own ideas about my spiritual relationship to the whole, and it really resonated with me the first time I stepped into a New Thought spiritual community. Because what was invited in that experience was this. As opposed to, it's not to be questioned, I was invited into this. Question everything. Question everything. Instead of God being a personality deeply invested in my life, I was invited into this. God is the principle of creation itself. It is not a personality, but something we personalize. And instead of believing or being invited to believe that God doles out reward and punishment based on how I act in my life, there is no reward, there is no punishment, except, he has a caveat, except in the manner of my use of this principle of creation. Reward and punishment come from the manner in which I choose to use this principle. If I choose to use the principle in a destructive or violent way, the most likely recipient of the adverse effects of that is not going to be anything outside the self, it is going to be me. That is how we define, it's funny because you brought this up, you said we don't use these words in New Thought, but we do use these words in New Thought sometimes. That is how we define sin, a misuse of the principle. Self-inflicted nonsense is what sin is. We are not punished for our sins. We are not punished for anything. The outflow of our lives is the result of everything we think, everything we believe, and everything we feel, rooted in the foundational principle, God is all there is. So how will we choose to use this principle today? We layer language on the unlimited, and thus we limit it in our own minds. And this ultimately can become self-defeating. And it happens in New Thought. We try to figure it all out, and we become so narrowly focused in the way we think it should be that we forget sometimes we should break it all down. Let it go. I don't know what I'm doing. We should break it all. Break it all down. Let go of what we think we know and approach life from a Buddhist perspective like that of a child. Live life from the point of childlike wonder. What an amazing universe we live in. If we are limiting our own minds, it ultimately becomes self-defeating. And the more we endeavor to unlimit, the greater our experience of divinity itself. Irrespective of what we have experienced or seen in the last couple days, I want you to know evil does not exist. Evil does not exist. There is no power called evil. There's only the power of creation. When it is misused, then we are empowering evil expression. But evil in and of itself is not a fundamental power. It does not exist. There's one thing that exists, the power of love. How will you choose to use it today? We empower love in thought. Right now, it's easy to see the evil behavior. And I struggled a lot yesterday. And I want to let you off the hook because I imagine there are many people who have struggled. I struggle too. I have challenges. But it is the power of New Thought that have allowed me to gracefully grow through those perceptions of challenge. So, first things first. Let us consider that divine unfoldment does not require certainty. It requires courage. It requires coherence. And it requires consent. My invitation to each and every one of us is to move forward in life from this point and evermore, choosing presence over habit, letting go of the habits of ill-conceived notions of destruction and violence, and choosing the presence of love, choosing the presence of light, and choosing the presence of the divine in everything we think, everything we say, and in every way we behave. Peace and blessings. You are magnificent. Each week, I offer a life practice to support the message as it has been presented. And because we are going back to these fundamental basics, beginning with God is all there is, I want us to, here we go, begin each day by speaking aloud, God is absolute goodness, everywhere present and expressing as this day. You can take a picture of it. This will also be available on our website when we post the video of today's talk in the archive. And in addition to beginning each day with this idea, God is absolute goodness, everywhere present and expressing as this day, actively look in your life for 3 expressions of goodness and name them. Take some notes of your findings. Keep notes of your findings and see what you fill up on that page.
Are you spiritual but not religious? Do you believe in unconditional love? Are you ready to create the life you know you deserve? Are you looking for an inclusive spiritual community? Do you want to discover how magnificent you really are? If you're looking for a spiritual path that's all about love, freedom of choice, and compassion,
we can't wait to meet you.
Unity of Tucson, Sundays at 9:15 a.m.
Need a moment of peace or inspiration? Call the Unity of Tucson prayer line for a comforting, uplifting prayer, available 24/7. Each month, we offer a new affirmative prayer to support you on your prayer journey. Call today and let the power of prayer uplift your spirit.